A geopolitical research firm, SB Morgan, as SBM Intelligence, says victims of kidnapping and their families paid over 2.57 billion naira as ransom to secure their freedom between July 2024 and June 2025. Now, the firm, in its latest report titled The Economics of Nigeria's Kidnap Industry, says 48 billion naira was the total amount demanded by kidnappers from their victims in the said period. Now, it also claimed that more than 4,722 people were kidnapped in at least 997 incidents, in which at least 762 people were killed in the same period. Now, according to SBM, Nigeria's kidnapping crisis has evolved into a lucrative criminal enterprise, with the Northwest identified as the most violent. It says the Southeast and South-South face targeted religious abductions and financial extortion. While identifying poverty, unemployment, and weak law enforcement as the root causes of insecurity in the country, it called on the security forces to dismantle the criminal networks for the country to break the cycle of kidnappings, ransoms, and deaths. Now, for more on the SBM Intelligence report on insecurity and payment of trillions of naira as ransom to kidnappers by victims, I'm now joined by from Wavedon, England, by Cheta Nwanze, as a partner at SBM Intelligence. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, in that intro, it is safe then to say that this truly is an industry. It has become an industry, talking about kidnapping and abductions in the country. What exactly is driving this industrial scale abductions?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. So to answer your question, the root causes are quite simple. You have economic desperation. People are desperate. So while the economy may have stabilized, the good effects that we hope have not trickled down to the population. More people are getting poorer. Inflation has been very high. And we have weak governance and the security apparatus. So you have a situation where people get away with it. It's just that simple. We've had so many kidnappers abducting people, collecting ransoms, nothing happens. So essentially, what that means is you are motivating more people to get involved. And then, of course, in your last story, we're talking about the security apparatus identifying that there's a problem with proliferation of small arms. That is a problem. Back in 2020, we published a report that showed that there were about 6 million small arms in circulation around the country. We have every reason to believe that that number may have gone up in the intervening 5 years. So in as much as small arms are not legal, they are quite accessible to so many people in Nigeria, and that's a problem. So people are increasingly taking the law into their hands, and people are increasingly taking action. If we're to put it like that, I can't think of another word. And people are increasingly taking action to put food on the table, and many of them are turning to crime.
Yes, indeed. And in your report, I mean, it's really curious. You've really done a very thorough report. Let me point out one thing that I actually discovered. I mean, there are regional variations. It depends on where you are. It determines the level in terms of the demands and, of course, the sophistication of this enterprise. Tell us more about that, how the region determines, the figures that we're seeing. And what factors may be, underlying factors?
So again, it's one thing that we must accept, and I think it's important to accept this so that we can actually start making progress in Nigeria, is that our country is a country of many nations. So you can say roughly that the different nations align roughly with the 6 geopolitical zones. It's not an exact like for like alignment. So essentially, the different security drivers or the different drivers of insecurity in each geopolitical region affects the nature of the violence, the nature of crime in that region. So take, for example, the fact that we see a lot of mass abductions in the Northwest. That is being driven by the fact that we have all sorts of bandit groups. There's an unaddressed quote unquote civil war between the Hausa and the Fulani groups that has led a lot of people into banditry. So the banditry is very much uncontained. You have groups like Lakwera running wild. You have people like the Dojo Tilde running wild, and not much has been done to really bring them to book. So we define a mass abduction as an incident where five or more people have been kidnapped. And the vast majority of those, number one, 23% of all the kidnap incidents over the year in review were mass abductions. But the vast majority of those were in the Northwest, specifically Zamfara and Katsina. Those were the two states that were that are the big problems with them in terms of mass abductions. In the southeast, basically the separatists are running riots. The sit at home, for example, is causing a big problem with the economy of the southeast, and these people are using things like kidnap violence to extort money from people. The only part of the country that is, and it's not exactly safe, but it's relatively quiet compared to the others, is the Southwest.
With
And it's
5.3%.
yes, and you cannot divorce that from the fact that essentially it's in the South, Lagos is the part of the country that is driving the economy of the country. I mean, think about it this way. Recently, we had a report from the Bureau of Statistics about capital importation, and 32 states did not receive anything in terms of foreign direct investment. It sounds pretty bad until we remember that we have 36 states. So 32 out of 36 states did not receive anything in terms of foreign investment. That's a pretty bad return, and that tells you a lot about what is happening with the economy. So, to
Right.
paraphrase Bill Clinton, is the economy stupid?
Right, right. Yes, indeed. And speaking of which, I mean, you also point out the broader economic consequences of this trend. Talk more on that and how this is really affecting foreign direct investment that, like you talk about, and also public confidence in security forces. It continues to deteriorate, and that's according to your report.
Well, not just according to my reports or to our reports.
Right.
I'm a part of an organization, but it's something that we see. I mean, the newspapers tell that tale routinely. You have so many incidents, and we documented some of those incidents in that report, where the security services claims that no ransom was paid, only for a few weeks later you heard from the victims that ransoms were paid. I'll give an example which is not exactly personal to me, but I have an indirect knowledge of that. A staff of the university's commission was kidnapped along with his family at the start of last year, and then unfortunately one of his kids was killed. And then eventually the family was let go. Then the police claimed that, oh, they rescued them. They didn't pass the smell test because A, nobody was arrested. And then B, when nobody was arrested, eventually staff from the NUC began to speak out, said that, oh, they actually contributed money and delivered 30 million naira to the kidnappers. So when you have such a scenario, you now want to do some basic maths here. What would be the average on the level of that person? The average
Right.
salary was about, say, 1.2 million naira per year. The ransom delivered was 30 million. Now, let us assume, for the sake of ease of calculation, the salary was 1.5 million naira per year. This is accurate as of
Yeah.
the start of 2024. It would mean that 20 people contributed their entire annual income in order to raise that ransom. Of course, we know that people are not walking around with their entire annual income in their
Right.
pockets. So, which means that possibly 10 times as many people contributed, which is 200 people. And these 200 people would have heard the police claim that no ransom was paid. And a lot of them will be like, hang on, but I contributed and I know that it was delivered before these people were released.
Yeah.
So you certainly have 200 people losing trust in the security services and they will speak with other people.
Right.
So you now have exponential cascading effects. So I think that one of the things that is pretty important is that the security services need to do a lot of work to restore trust in themselves because we
Right.
cannot begin to tackle this crisis if the people do not trust the security services.
Yeah. We'll have to leave it there. I mean, I was going to ask you if, there were attempts to actually criminalize ransom payments. Can government really, disrupt ransom payments? How can government go about that? In 30 seconds, if you can.
So one of the problems we have in Nigeria is making laws that we cannot enforce. Enforceability. This is a big problem. You don't make a law which you cannot enforce. It's that simple. Otherwise, you end up
Right.
extending the vicious cycle of mistrust.
Yes, indeed. We'll have to leave it there. Cheta Nwanze is partner at SBM Intelligence, coming out with this report on the state of insecurity in Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time and your work.